everybody. Welcome to this episode of Walk Along the Beams. We're going to be talking about The Wizard in Glass. This is Dark Tower, book number 4. Of course, this is going to be the same fashion. It's a part 1. We read all the way up into the halfway mark, which was page 339, part 3, Come Reap. Um, it looks like we got one person late, but we got Steve, the comic voice here, and we got Trev, the shipping guru here. Hashtag Matt Woods. No, say hello to the chat, and then we're gonna get started.
Drink.
We got Tina here, of course. Tina's been here for days. Thanks, Tina.
So,
I
babe,
really appreciate you, Tina, a lot. You're very
you're always
uplifting,
seen
and,
us.
right? We got
She's
First
always
Phil
here.
here. What's up, Phil?
It's
What's up, Phil?
6 weeks in traction.
contraction.
I'm gonna go back
You
to
fell and you
English.
went like this, didn't you?
We got Steve, we got Trey. All right, we got Cheney. What's up, Cheney? And we had met Cheney recently on what was it, Fanboy Prime, was it?
No,
Is
that's
that what?
mine. He's one of our
Oh,
Dynasty Breaks customers.
boom, that's where it was. I don't remember. I just know I remember. What's up,
Robert.
Robert Springs? How's it going? And I think that is everybody. All right, so a little background information before we get started. Let me pull up my place. So Wizard in the Glass came out in 1997. The book before this was Wasteland, came out in 1991, so it had that 6-year gap. After this, we have Wolves of the Kala, which is 2003. Another big, gap in the mythos. Okay, so to fill you in on the gap between 1991 and 1997, Edie Gerald's Game 92, Dolores Claiborne 92, Nightmares and Dreamscapes, the books of short stories in 93. This is crazy. I didn't know this came out before Wizard and Glass. Insomnia in 94. I didn't remember that. Okay, Rose Matter in 95. And the reason I highlighted that because Insomnia is super important. It's one of the heavy connected Dark Tower books. Rose Matter in 95, Green Mile 96, Desperation and Regulators in 96, Regulators connecting as well, and then Desperation as well. And then here we are at Wizard and Glass. And I want to say, don't quote me on this, but I want to say this is around the time we're getting closer to a sober Stephen King. And it kind of shows in his writing, He kind of started this new thing. And I want to use the word, it's been described as scatterbrain is the best, Steve. But yeah, I kind of feel like that's kind of, and I mean, it probably goes with that. I wouldn't know personally, but that it feels right, kind of thing. So okay, the book opens up and it kind of gives you two weird caveats. It's the only book that I can remember that directly has a chapter from the last book as the book starts out, because we get a prologue called Blaine, and it basically gives you the last chapter of the last book, kind of like a recap or whatever. It's kind of nice, especially for a 6-year gap. If you hadn't read this, for us, it's pretty fresh. So, for me, it was just I kind of skimmed it real quick and made sure there was nothing new, but it's an exact copy. So then we get to, and this book is set up a little different. It's set up by parts, and it does have chapters and then sub chapters within those chapters. But for the most part, it is set up by major parts of the story. The first part being riddles, and that directly finishes our culmination from Wastelands. What's up, brother Joe? Station. So we start out with riddles. Right off the bat, we get the epic showdown between Roland's quartet and Blaine, with Roland laying down riddle after riddle, eventually coming to an end. Jake goes next, the laying down the riddle he learned from Calvin Tower, while Susanna and Oi helplessly watch along Eddie. Eddie zones out. Jake reads the hardest riddle and the hardest 10 riddles in the riddle book, and Blaine looks to be the golden goose winner. But while in the zone, Eddie comes through and sets the devil on fire, defeating Blaine. Now all now at their destined spot, Topeka, Kansas, they find this is where this is not their where and when, but is being devoured by a super flu called Captain Trips. Continue on the journey and now looking for the path of the beam. They go turnpiking and spot a huge building in their path. Roland feels it is time to tell the story of his past. And that's basically the whole culmination of everything that happens in part 1. And it's a lot because it's the whole Blaine thing. And then we do this little kind of like rest in between as they're walking down the highway kind of thing, looking for the beam because we find out we lost the beam. And then, that's when Roland finally kind of takes our break, has the palaver, and tells this epic story of his past. So our first question tonight, and I'm going with Steve first.
Yeah.
Over here.
Bring it.
Thoughts on the old ones? Why Blaine? What was his purpose, his power? I mean, we see the traditional purpose, but when you really get down to the meats of it, like who was riding in this train? Like, I mean, it seems so Richie first class, but basically thoughts on the old ones. Let's touch base on that first.
Oh, the old ones, like the ones who built the city in the first place. So Blaine was probably an AI because he even said so much that his consciousnness wasn't in that train. It was back in the city and all those computers underneath the ground. So he was probably in control of running a lot of that city at the time. And that's always a thing that got me too, because he was planning on doing suicide. But how can he do suicide if his brain and his consciousness is actually back in Lud, not on that train? Like he'd have to transfer himself all into the train and short out everything in Lud. I know he blew the city up, but he only used gas to kill the people. He didn't want to destroy the technology there, right? So
the city's still there.
Is he really dead? The train's destroyed, but he's probably still back in Lud.
Yeah, I mean, technically, by what we know now, right, he wouldn't be dead. All his stuff is like backed up in the mainframe or whatever. Yes, his actual body is, but like, I mean, technically,
or was that his body? I mean, the whole city is his body, right? He's an AI, so
true
I
that.
mean, he's just
because
an AI that's gone insane.
In
Yeah, he's an AI that's gone insane because of the thousands of years of him living basically alone. And he even said so much, at one point he served the city. So he served doing whatever functions that the old ones had created for him to do. And then in times, some of them revered him as a god. So he's slowly gone insane, just like Patricia. So maybe she was another AI that did a different function. I don't know. See, like we get little hints, but we don't get the whole story.
Another this kind of leading into the deeper root of my question, but why give Blaine that much power? I mean, this dude not only and do you think all that was given power or acquired? Do you think he just got so bored he started infiltrating like every mainframe within Lud?
Yeah, that's what I think it was, because they probably had codes to shut him down, but those codes have been long forgotten since the old ones are all gone. So nobody knows how to shut him off, and I think that was part of what the Lord Perth guy there, the Nazis. He wanted to get control of those computers, so he wanted those passwords or those pass keys so he could directly control Blaine or override. Because Blaine had absolute control over the entire city for so long, right? And I think you're right, because he's an AI, so he managed to infiltrate into the rest of the system and just take over. And he probably even rewrote the passcodes. I mean, we're going to see that coming up in the next book too. We're going to see something else with positronics and passcodes and this kind of stuff, right? So maybe.
I always go back to that gate code, right, that we saw in the last book, and like, I mean, so intricate, right? But like, then you always ask that question: well, was it a gate to get inside, or was it something to keep people from, was it keeping that thing within there? I mean, and it's something I really didn't talk about, but like where they were keeping Blaine, it's called a cradle. That's not really something we use here within terminology as far as a train goes. Like trains don't really stop at cradles, they don't rest at cradles. I want to say that kind of plays into that whole passcode and why they were keeping him there kind of thing. Them calling it his cradle kind of thing, more like a tomb maybe. I don't know. All right, Trev,
it's a little different story because I mean the mono it's a single rail, so it's a magnetic thing. So
or his cradle of life. It's where he was born.
Yeah, cradle. There you go.
I thought maybe does it ever explain that, like, as time moved on, everything started to deteriorate, like if that happened abruptly or if that just was a gradual thing? Maybe the old gods were dying out and they gave Blaine control to do more, to keep things moving, because people were, I don't know, were they being born and just not surviving or what?
Okay, so some kind of cataclysm. That's the word. Cataclysm happened at some point.
Multiple. multiple, right? We've heard,
So like
we've
like radiation and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
and it's wiped out
mhm,
like a lot of people very
worse than
quickly, especially the
radiation.
smart ones who operated all that shit. So then
So
the
so
dumb
maybe
ones that
they,
were left behind had no idea how to operate any of this stuff.
Mhm.
because he was talking like that was him down below with all those mainframes. Like that wouldn't be something I would think he would control if he's saying that that's him, that he like took over. Maybe they built him and gave him that much power, and then he just went AWOL.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so let's deviate on something we have seen, right? So the old ones did make the Guardians, right? We ran into Shardang, and they were. I mean, he had like the stamp, just like with the positronic, but
North Central
or
Positronics.
pop
Mhm.
postronics or whatever. Okay, so they were creating things that guarded the beam, right? And you have to entitle that thing with the power to guard the thing that is guarding or holding up the known everything, right? Macroverse, universes, whatever.
Mhm.
So I always kind of led in back to what you were saying, that like I kind of see that he infiltrated maybe everything else around him. But it looks like they kind of gave him that power from the get go, because the way his mainframe was made, it's all the way at the bottom of the city, protected and stuff like that. Like, even though we saw like Roland running out of all that, it was all like stuff that was set up for protection that had been destroyed due to decay. It was like tunnels leading down to different rooms. If you kind of think even the way TikTok's room was, it was a vault. It was a sealed vault down there.
It was a
Like, I mean,
silo, like a missile
Mhm.
silo. I
yeah,
think that's what
yeah,
the way they described it.
yeah. It had like like basically the silo doors on the outside.
Yeah, and it was an
Um,
empty silo, so they launched whatever was in there. So he just took it over and made it into his little throne room.
that's another thing, that Blaine was sitting next to, maybe possibly at one time, an active silo. Was he the reason why? And we do
Yeah,
know that
if he set it
radiation,
off. Yeah, it's
and we
like
do know
Terminator,
that
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, but okay, so these are one of the things that are kind of left unexplained throughout the whole series. I don't think we're ever going to get some explanations on this, because it's all
Mhm.
like super past, right? I mean, we
Yeah,
get some flecks of it. It does remind me of stories like Halo and some other things. And of course, this is way before all that. But seeing these glimpses and the concepts of what they were trying to do, or their purposes of what they were doing, because we've heard that they were trying to mix science and magic. That kind of makes sense. I
yeah,
mean, but you think about our path, right? And how we're going. And yes, we're doing the whole AI thing and technology, and humans are known for shortcuts and this and that. But what would have been humanized logic on some of these things that they were doing, right? I get creating a guardian that's protecting the beam, but at the same time, why not make it known throughout midworld, outworld, everywhere that the beams exist? The dark tower needs to be saved, kind of thing.
yeah. Like,
You know,
where's the
they're
communication? Where's the satellites?
yeah.
Where's the phones and stuff? Like, they must be able to have cell phones and shit, talk to each other.
So I always go back to like, what was their design? What were they trying to achieve? Yes, we know that they failed, but I don't even see, like, as far as what I can tell, I don't even see where they were really aiming. Honestly, it looks like a branch of a tree, and they were just like, we're gonna try that, and we're gonna try that, and we're gonna try a little of that. Oh shit, that didn't work. Okay, we're gonna
Firing
try
the
that.
darts into the dartboard, right? Thunk.
Yeah.
As
What's
far
up,
as the
John?
dark tower goes, I was always kind of under the impression that maybe the people that made it to the dark tower never returned.
There might be some semblance to that, and there then
So
rumors
that's why it's
already.
almost kind of like a myth, because there's no firsthand knowledge of it.
Yeah, and a
Yeah,
lot of that we have seen merit to within the story, because there has been times when Roland asked, "Well, what's beyond the desert?" Well, nobody goes beyond the desert. There's nothing out there, or we get to like
no
further
one comes
past the
back.
desert in a whole nother town, and he asks, "Hey, well, what's past those mountains?" Well, we
Oh yeah,
think that's no. It's kind
I've
of
never
like
been
Fall off
past
the
that
edge.
mountain.
it's kind of like at this point in the story, and to me that kind of makes sense. I mean, these people are living in a fear, of this world that's going haywire. Time's not making any sense, day and night's not making any sense. The only thing that is at the moment is like gravity and a couple other things that are still kind of functioning. But like, you think about it, like, I mean, what makes more sense, to run from town to town or just stay isolated in that one town where all this crazy shit's going? Yeah, I mean, there's one thing that mentioned in this story in such small passing in this book alone. They talk about like, yeah, we used to have electricity, and it was like, I want to say like 3 generations back, and then it just ended one day, and we didn't, we just kind of continued with on that.
Yeah.
But you're talking about like, that's one of the biggest, deepest fears within our culture today, is like loss of electricity, or stuff like that. And during at this time, it was just like a passing thing. Well, we had electricity, my grandparents used to talk about it, but we kept on going. um but it's just interesting. I don't know, but that's kind of my thought on that. Is like, it just makes, especially like when we get to Lud, and Lud's just so busy on beating itself down into the ground further, like,
Yeah.
like on purpose. But then there's other towns that we ran into, like River Crossing, like really, I mean, the first town that we came across, Toll, they were just living their lives, kind of, it wasn't like this catalytic thing had come to their town yet. Of course, with Toll, it was rolling, right? And all these other towns, it's the same thing. It's um, death comes in on a pale horse. No, but it's always interesting to go there, and I don't. I think it's one of the concepts that a lot of people don't think about. But what was the original idea with a lot of this stuff, with the with the old ones? What because and Steve kind of brought this up. We're going to get in some interesting stuff in the next couple of books. All right, so let's move along to our next questions. What's up, man?
Did you get all
Number,
these people?
yeah, I did.
Brother Joe.
Okay.
Let's see. So, question number 2 of the night: What would drive Blaine to engage in such a deadly game? Discuss psychological aspects from Blaine's behavior on even accepting this kind of ridiculous thing. When we encounter Blaine, it's described that he was done like effing around. That's why he like eventually did what he did to Patricia, and he's gotten to the point where he's like, "F the world, there's nothing else for me. Like, I'm done," kind of thing. But then this group comes along that's mythical, right? And all of a sudden, this promise of like riddles and stuff. But like, you think about this everlasting AI that has to know everything, and as we see in the journey, he pretty much does, right? The only thing that he doesn't know is logic.
Mhm.
So, I mean, and then that's kind of like part of it. Okay, but Trev, let's start with you. What would drive Blaine to engage in such a deadly thing? He was already going to kill himself. Why even like? What's your thoughts? What's your thoughts?
I think he was intrigued that they were gunslingers, that they brought back something maybe in his past that he knew that was, I don't know, maybe he was tricked by a gunslinger in the past.
Go more on that. Go more. I like that.
I don't know.
Because honestly, that's something that I've never thought about, but it is something that's prevalent in our story majorly, because in the cradle, and you kind of commented this to me backstage in the last book, you were like, whoa, Roland's been here before. It is future Roland, because the statue was above in Blaine's cradle, and it specifically to Susan and Eddie look like Roland. And then we get inside, and Blaine already has this like ice sculpture, like sculpted of Roland. And I kind of described what was going on. It's just because Roland, resembles this persodium, of the gunslinger, and that's why he resembles that statue and stuff. But I like what you were saying. Maybe he was like betrayed by like a previous gunslinger or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, Roland's like the most famous gunslinger as far as in these parts. That's why his image is like the image of the gunslinger.
Arthur Eld. And Steve's right. I didn't even think of that at first, but yeah, damn, Steve,
that's who the statue is. It's Arthur Eld, and then
it's Arthur
Roland's
Eld,
the descendant, so he looks just like him.
Yeah, he's like
because he's a blood relative of it.
He's the 38th descendant, I think it is, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
like the 38th great. All right, Steve, what are your thoughts on what would make Blaine?
I think Blaine was full of shit. He was lying. He's not dead. And he actually even said it. He's bored. He's been messing with that TikTok man and putting the God drums on and enjoying, humans killing each
Listen
other.
to ZZ Top every day.
Yeah, ZZ Top. Velcro Fly.
Fry. And then we found out it's not even the real version of Velcro Fly. It's some like Spanish rendition. So like that's why he auto-tuned the audio out, and it was just
And
the
just have the
drums because
drums.
he got tired of
I listened to that song while I was reading that book too.
Yeah, me
It's like,
too.
every time they had that, I thought, all right, I got to put that on now. But yeah,
No, I like that. I like
he's
that you
bored.
thought Blaine was lying or whatever. And I
I think he's lying. I think he's
honestly,
full
I
of
kind of
shit.
see that right at the end of it. The whole like conclusion with Eddie beating him, walking up, shooting him in the face. He's still talking and stuff, and he even slows down the train enough for them to survive. So like, there's evidence that you were kind of right about that. What's
Yeah.
up, Marcus? Stephen King, baby.
Can we say something? We didn't say something last time about whenever they were leaving town, like the people that were just committing suicide, and like
Yeah.
the one scene is like from Resident Evil. The guy that's got like the swords in his body and stuff. He's like 7 feet tall. Like the line of people just walking into the crusher, and he's just like,
there was.
like
I forgot about
smashing
that.
them down, and they're just like
And
laying down.
honestly,
and
I didn't bring that up because it was so like kind of depressing and stuff. Yeah, it is, because that part of the story, and I don't know if I kind of believe with that version of humanity that we would get. But okay, you have to remember that they were being tricked, kind of like almost by magic, by like, and not like real magic, by science magic this time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So like, and they were being like, so they're, I mean, basically it was like Lord of the Flies down to the prime number kind of thing. And they, so at the end, it wasn't like because their whole life there had been killing each other, and they didn't even know why, kind of thing. And then like when they got the green light, which turned out to be a red light, they were like, oh, well, that means we can clock out, and everybody just gets to die. We're done, and everybody just died in weird fashions. And the ones that didn't just got killed by the gas. I mean, it was kind of
And that's
No,
why
I don't think
Blaine
that,
would engage in that deadly game, because he wasn't going to get killed anyway. So
yeah,
why not?
I want to say it's
was bored.
boredom.
He
I
was
want to
bored.
say,
Yeah.
I mean, even though like I mean, because you think about it, like everything he shows, all especially branching out into multiple worlds, knowing stuff from, their wins, their what, stuff like that. Like, how could you not know the things that they brought up and stuff? And even the logic part of it, that's something we brought up in like AI. You're talking about at the very beginning, early of like AI's existence. So how had we not figured logic into any of our riddle stacking? Like, I don't think. I think logic is usually the first thing that gets programmed into AI. That's what makes it so dangerous. Yeah, like when you talk about it, what kind of AI can't think around, corners like Roland? Like, what kind of efficiency is that? It gets to a problem and it's like, no, it sounds like Apple and IBM when they first started with their green monitors. You know what I'm saying? No, you didn't put directory. You didn't type in directory. You put in execute. That we don't know what you're trying to. Yeah,
does not compute.
Maybe the unhealthy.
That was a good way to defeat him too. Logic.
That kind of backs up the notion that maybe he wasn't very sophisticated when they made him, and that he actually developed on his own.
Time.
Okay, I can go with that.
Yeah.
If he wasn't, programmed with logic, like you're saying, that makes more sense, probably.
There's a lot of like absent things in the logic thing. Like, what's logical about him just detonating the city of all the people? Like, but leaving the city. Like, I get protecting yourself, but why not efficiency? Move your brain into your body, like, and just move. And we know it was on like a track that pretty much went around this whole world. That's just his chosen stop, is where we ended, kind of thing. Say hi to Maurice's Yarn and Crafts. Hey, Maurice.
But there was that big thing with the antenna on the train, right? Because the antenna is what he, talked to himself back in Lud. And he probably couldn't escape Lud anyway. And that was another problem with being bored. There was no other technology for him to go to. So his brain is stuck in that one city.
Could be. I could see that as well. That's some of my favorite parts of this, Trev. And for those of y'all that don't know, Trev's our new reader. But there's all kind of possibilities on this, and he is kind of vague on a lot of this stuff. I
Yep.
mean, we're gonna get some detailed answers. Don't think that this whole story is like this. Is not. But on some of these like outside world building stuff, I will say he gets a little vague. But I kind of like that because it leaves each and own to all these different. I mean, it's led us to this YouTube discussion thing, and without that, we would. You know what I'm saying? All right,
Mhm.
so okay, so my last question, and Trev, I'm going with you in this. How does beating Blaine contribute to the development of Roland and his quartet? Like, what do they pick up for?
That's a good one.
Hmm.
I mean, every enemy, I mean, you gain
Confidence.
some.
They gained confidence in knowing that, for instance, Eddie, that his visions, to trust his visions, maybe,
His goofiness, right?
and to
Remember
everything
what
like
Roland thought he was silly all the
Ka
time?
was basically Ka,
Yeah.
What
like
about that?
them trying to come to terms with trusting it.
I like that. What about like any father figure stuff that goes into the trust, that kind of thing? Because he has kind of taken on that role, right? To the
Mhm.
whole content. Steve, what you got? What you got?
What have I got? What have I got? Yes,
I'm
it's the
going
big.
somewhere with
It is a
this.
big thing with Eddie because Roland, was thinking of Eddie as a fool, and he's like, Jesus Christ, this guy keeps coming up with all this silly crap all the time. Aren't you going to take this gunslinging stuff seriously, bud?
Right.
And then he
And
finds
then,
out that that silliness is what saved their lives. So
yeah.
it was him crying his pardon, like cry pardon, I'm
Cry your part.
sorry.
I love that scene.
Yeah, that was a
So
big deal
like,
though, right there, because there was a reckoning kind of thing.
so
Roland
what
recognized.
about? It's the first time in the story that we've actually seen the quartet operate as a full-fledged team.
Yeah, that too,
Now,
right?
in the journey, right, we actually seen them move and learn and stuff like that. But as gunslingers, it was really the first time that they came along, came up with a plan, a strategy. They set forth, they all stuck to it, and they all did their due diligence, each and every single one of them.
Right to the
Um,
very end.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that we could say to take away from this, but I want to say in this part of the story, it's the first time where they fully function as a quartet the way they are, and it gets to the point where they're mind reading during this scene, which was pretty dope to learn, right, Trev?
Mhm. Yeah.
That once you're within a quartet, you are actually like linked like a hive mind kind of thing,
Mhm.
and you
Yep.
can turn it off and on when you want to, which is pretty dope.
We are the
Um,
Borg.
And Trev, I didn't ask you that, but like, now that we're at the end of this, did you ever think the Oi was going to be a participant
No.
and it's funny because it's actually referenced twice by King, where Blaine actually like he notes that Oi, the Billy Bumbler from Midworld, is
Is
there.
part
He
of the
states that,
content.
yeah, and he
Yeah.
actually, like, when he lists the trial of contestants, he lists Oi as one of the contestants as
Yeah.
well. So I always wonder for new readers if they ever, like, in their back of their mind was he really, because my thought was like, was he going to use Oi as this gimmick where he would ask him this question and Oi couldn't answer because he can't really speak, and then bam, they got their goose cooked kind of thing. Of course, we can't have
Yeah.
the book stop right here, right? We know there's
No.
some other books past this.
Yeah, like Oi. I mean, he doesn't pause for answers and stuff. It's like he's so self-aware that he answers just like anybody else answers.
Yeah,
He only says, certain things, but
yeah.
we
Well,
got
speaking
Rad.
of quartet, we got one of our quartets backstage. Let's bring them on in. What's up, Norman? How you doing?
I'm up. I'm up.
Are you really?
Now you're right on
Well,
time. We're still.
I'm here. I'm
That's
here.
what you look. That's what you look like when you wake up in the morning. Damn.
Jesus, man.
Exactly.
That's pretty scary, dude.
Hey, some find that very handsome and
Let me see your war face.
robust.
Bullshit. You don't scare me.
What's up, 23? Um,
Oh,
Ignoring real quick, we're talking about part one, which is basically the riddles part. It's the whole defeat of Blaine, and then that little bit of turnpiking, and then right before Roland sits down and tell a story. We did the first three questions, and then I can ask you the last question now that because you might have not heard this one. So, how did beating Blaine contribute to the development of Roland and his quartet?
hmm. Um, it brought him close together. Showed Roland, Eddie isn't useless. Eddie had a lot of use.
Yeah, I didn't.
Brought them together. Um, Especially when they thought, against such that was pretty scary. Like those were pretty odds going against that train, and
It was tense. Like you talk about reading those scenes and going through the riddles with Roland, and Roland's supposed to be this G, right? And he's just throwing down like, I mean, I'm a riddle master. I love riddles and shit. And some of the riddles that he's asking there, I don't think I ever could have figured it out. Like,
yeah, and
there's some tough ones, like the one about the shadow, like what walks tall, like. And I
and
think I would have got the first part, but no.
the
Go ahead.
book said that um I always want to call him Charlie. Blaine wanted knew all text and knew all dimensions, not just that dimension, but like he knew all dimensions, so all riddles. And
Okay, so not only that, but I forgot to mention this. I'm glad you brought this up, and I want to touch base on this real quick. But this is the first time we hear of levels of the tower, right? Because he was
yeah,
talking about the harpsichord. It came from like another level of the tower. So
Mhm.
now we know the Dark Tower, and we also know that there's different levels, layers within the tower, and some of these things have access to it. And Blaine evidently had access to multiple levels of the Dark Tower. Okay, Ray, go ahead. I'm sorry.
but yeah, that's it. That was all. But yeah,
I'm gonna because everybody else. All y'all brought up great answers. I don't think there is anywhere. But my thing was, I think it's the first time that they worked together as a team to accomplish. Like it's the first time we see the quartet, really go forward, set down a strategy, a plan, and they kind of go through, and we see that
yeah,
each
definitely.
each one of including Eddie, and that was my favorite part because the whole zoning out thing with Eddie, like I remember reading that for the first time, and I did not see it going that way. I did not know that Eddie was going to be the triumphant, the one that defeats. Okay, everybody, give your honest answer on who you thought was going to be Blaine. I will say it was Jake. From all
Jake.
the information that we got leading up into this story, he got the riddle book. He had like all this background information that turns out to be right. I literally thought it was going to be either the Calvin Tower riddle or it was going to be like a riddle that specifically came out of his essay or whatever. So I, for one, was really surprised when we got to the end and it was Eddie. What about you, Steve?
I knew it was going to be Eddie
You
because
bastard.
he had been doing all those foolishness there, and you're dealing with a computer; it's logical. So the only thing that can defeat a logical machine that hates illogic is illogical.
You're
So
right.
that's
And
I knew that Eddie was going to do it with all his little sarcasm and bullshit things. That
he
that was going to
layers
be
it
it.
so well.
Oh man,
Trev?
Yeah,
And
I
the
thought
way
it was gonna be
Eddie,
Jake.
oh, go ahead.
I thought it was going to be Jake. I thought maybe there was a riddle that we hadn't. Maybe Stephen King came back and he was like, "Well, I didn't tell
I,
him
I
about this one riddle that the guy at the bookstore told him that wasn't in the book or something." You know what I mean?
I kind of
Something
thought
like
uh,
something
that.
like that, but I thought as a group they were going to come up with a riddle together that was going to like maybe they all had pieces of the riddle and they were going to do it like that. I thought it was
That would
something
have been
like that.
dope. That would have been real dope.
Aaron,
Um, Eddie kept having the dreams of the Dark Tower and everything, and making the key and all. And earlier,
yeah,
I I, I kind of thought that, but then Roland, talking about his past and how they were so good at riddles and all. I thought Roland was gonna save the day,
I want to say
but
this is the first time that I didn't think it was going to be Roland because I thought I can remember like after we had met the group at this point in the story, I wanted one of them to shine. Like, and my favorite character is Susanna, but for some reason, like, and no shame in my girl, but she just kind of sits there during this part. Like, she doesn't
Yeah,
do a whole.
That wasn't her strong suit. Everyone's
No,
got
no,
their
no. I
strong
mean, she
suits.
got him into. She got him in. She was good with the numbers, and she got him in.
Yeah,
And we
yeah,
know
she did
she's
that.
good at other stuff, but I can say it's not one of my favorite scenes with her in it because she's not really in it. She's just kind of like wondering if she should poke Eddie out of the zone thing, and thank God she didn't, kind of thing. I don't know. Okay, so let's get to well, I guess my last question was, why do we think Eddie's type of riddle won the day? And we kind of already, it is logic. Logic ends up beating Blaine, and we've talked about it many angles. Like, Aaron wasn't here for this, but I for one find it strange that he is beat by logic. And I was saying that that's the first thing that we as humans usually program within AI is logic. Besides just the basic coding of ones and zeros, the next thing that comes in is our basic understanding of logic. So it's really weird that Blaine was defeated by basic logic, and to the simplest degree, right? I mean, you're telling me that I think if you asked Chat GPT right now, Chat GPT would know the answer to that question, like, why did the dead baby cross the road? And you would have to phrase it differently, because if you asked it that specific question, it would pull up the answer from this book. But if you worded it differently, I'm pretty sure Chat, AI at this point would, you know what I'm saying? So that was,
Such a funny joke.
it's so random, right? That's the one that,
It's so random, yeah.
all
But,
his stuff, and the
King put a little nugget out there before that, because he always said, like, there was that little rhyme there: you don't play any silly games, or what was the rhyme? Don't say any silly things, and I won't play any silly games. That was like his little preamble to this whole thing, and I think that's what Eddie was kind of catching on, that if he was just doing stupidity at this thing, it would defeat him.
It's also that they were flipped, right? Because we actually see the real Charlie the Choo Choo, the one that Jake had all the real information on, is in Midworld. It's at an amusement park, kind of, that's decayed or whatever, and that's after they defeat Blaine. But all his information was really towards that, and we find out that it was all the information that like, it was all the stuff that Eddie had. And it was there from the beginning, because it's something that's brought up early on within that story about, like, especially when they bring up riddles and Eddie cracks that riddle, and Roland's like, and I find that strange, because we're getting in the story, right? And he's been compared to, is it Alan is the Elaine is the or is it Cuthbert? Is it Cuthbert?
I think you said Eddie's Cuthbert, right?
Right, Cuthbert. I always get the two
because
confused.
he's the jokester, the one who had
jokester.
yeah.
So, I mean, it's not like Roland hasn't been around a guy that's just like this, and maybe that plays weight later on. All right, so now we're at.
I want to mention. I thought it was pretty cool, Eddie, how he went back and he remembered the one compliment his brother gave him. It was the one that sparked him and was the reason why he beat him.
That whole line that, when he got in the zone, he had that silver tongue and he could literally talk the devil into setting himself on fire. It's like that expression.
It's so sick.
Yeah, it is, and it reminds me. It's just a ramped up version of, like, a good salesman could sell ice to an Eskimo, or kind of thing. But I mean, you're talking about it's ramped up in, like, the coolest way ever. Like, no, he could talk the devil into setting himself on fire. Like, how cool is that shit? And at this point, we've seen it. Not even with the zoned out thing. We had seen it, back in the Balazar thing, like him trying to get the drugs into that one bathroom, that whole scene with Balazar. I mean, Balazar could have shot him dead right then and there. He had no drugs on him. He knew it. Like, no, like he literally talked the devil into doing what he wanted to do, and literally played the part. Like, no, and these are those things that are leading into, like, most people, Eddie being one of their favorite characters. He has some very cool moments. But I do love that scene when we get that. It's like the one compliment that Henry, had given Eddie, and I even love the way it comes out. It was between the friends, and they're picking these mythical people that they know, fantasy, like, well, if we were about to get beat down, who would be in a fight with you? Well, I pick Myrtle McGirdle, from 6th grade. He's not around here no more, but that dude was cool. And then Henry was like, his brother, and then he talked about all the people he could have said. Yeah. Wow, I love that scene. I'm glad you brought that up, though. And then there's a lot of cool scenes, man. I mean, we're getting closer to one of my other favorite scenes, but there's a lot more scenes. So before we move on to part 2, because that's pretty much where we are. Basically at the end of this, we're about to get into the palaver and the story of Roland's backstory, because basically at this point they've defeated Blaine. They start on the turnpiking, which I don't know how many people are familiar with that term. I kind of grew up with that term. I don't know, like turnpiking was just something we said if you got in a car and got on a freeway, like that. And he makes it seem like, well, to my knowledge, he makes it seem like it's a term that people don't know. Anybody else have anything they want to throw down for part 1 of this?
Namman.
What?
What?
What's up, Namman?
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, is it okay? No echoes?
Mm-mm.
All right, sorry.
Hey, happy you could make it.
Yeah, I may not be able to stay for my wife calls, but
No,
I'll
that's
stay
fine.
as long as possible.
I didn't think you were going to be able to make it. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's your son's birthday today, right?
Yeah, we went out, had some dinner, so.
Then there were 5.
Hey, our cartoon is good. Okay. So Nama, we've been recently talking about part 1 of this book, leading all the way up until the point when, like, Roland palavers with the group. So right now we've talked about them beating Blaine, them getting on the highway and heading to the building that's in the middle of the road. Is there anything you kind of want to throw down, add to this? Maybe favorite parts or anything?
We're on book 4, right?
4, Wizard and Glass.
Yeah. Wizard and Glass. Oh, so we did the riddle contest. That was a fun
They
part.
beat. Well, who'd you think was, and when you first read that, who'd you think was going to be Blaine?
Who's gonna be? Oh, I thought Eddie was gonna do it. Honestly, yeah.
I thought it was going to be Oi. No, I'm playing.
Boy,
It set up. It set up.
he's gonna do it.
It really set up for Eddie to,
Yeah, that's what Steve said. Yeah, all right. I'm okay. Me and Trev thought it was going to be Jake. All right. I don't know. I believe they're set up for both. Okay. I believe
Gotta
they're
read them
set up-
foreshadows, man. Them foreshadows are all through the book. He loves foreshadows.
Yeah,
he set it up so that Eddie's like an underdog. Eddie's the underdog of all.
Never
I'm
underestimate
the only one that said Roland.
I know. You don't get no credit because Roland is the given. You're supposed to think Roland's going to just G through this whole thing because he is a G. But guess what?
I mean, he did
I
fantastic.
thought we were going to see why we're going to need Roland. Like, I thought it was actually going to be a key for Roland because his fingers were damaged and he was training everybody else to be gunslingers. So I thought maybe this was going to be Roland's new thing, was figuring this kind of stuff out.
I like that. And it's actually something I didn't think about. Yeah, and you are right, because like physically he was very ailed, within the last 2 books leading up to this. So that does make, and especially going into this, we learned that riddling was so huge in his culture, not really ours, so, and he was the one that kind of like, I didn't write down how many riddles he says, but I think it's in over 200 or something that he actually lays down by the end of the contest, where he's just like blah 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 blah.
Out of memory, like how many could you keep in your head? Jesus, I don't even know one.
I think I know 3. But I think I know like 3 by heart, but they're like the. I know the Sphinx riddle, and it's like the oldest riddle known to man. I know, like, yeah, I think I know
give you
2
first
more.
appearances, but.
First appearance. So, Namman, is there anything else you want to add to that?
Hey, I don't want to interrupt you guys, but can I test something really quick?
Test it.
Yeah.
What is a phrase that what's today's phrase? What is today's phrase from the
Thank you, Sai.
thank you side?
Yeah.
Like
How would you
Thank you.
spell side phonetically?
S
SAI.
I.
SAI?
Sai. Yeah.
That's how
SAI.
it's spelled. But
You mean
you
thank
mean how you
ye
say it?
Sai.
Phonetically,
Denki.
It-
So
Say
YE.
YEE.
Denki
Say.
SAI.
Sigh. Is the
Okay.
A silent?
Yeah. Like
Sai.
Raphael's size.
Hold on, guys.
Yeah.
Hold on.
They're spelled differently, aren't they? Though, is it for that weapon?
No, I
The
think it's
weapon's
the
the
same.
same.
Sai.
SAI.
Yeah,
SAI.
Huh.
Yeah, Sai.
Yeah. Gets you to the point.
And then, okay, so backstage, and not to bring it up, but there was a little confusion about this word. And I forgot I had the definition at the end of it. Me and Trevor were like backstage, and Trevor was a little confused on what that word specifically meant. And it's basically, it just means it's a more knightly way of saying madam or mister kind of thing.
Sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, let me play this. Let me play the sound. What I'm doing is I'm testing the software for Papa. So
And Channy, that was 100% right.
let me play it again.
Wait for it.
Oops, that's not it. That's not it.
Wah, wah.
No Toadash chimes.
Can you hear that?
No, I don't hear the chimes.
No, I didn't hear it.
You don't hear thank you, Sai?
No.
Okay, your software failed.
Okay, we gotta get going.
Okay,
I
let's
got
go.
limited time.
Yeah. So one last thing I want to mention on this is, Cheney brought this up, but then we haven't brought on this, but each one of these will have major Tolkien references. Of course, we had like Rivendell, we had like the Mines of Moria with Lud in the last one. I didn't even mention that one, but that's kind of like, okay, so with this one specifically, he deviates from Lords of the Rings and he goes to the Hobbit and he does the whole riddling challenge with Smeagol and but that's kind and the way the riddle contest ended is almost exactly the same. Bilbo asks Smeagol about, what's in his pocket. It's not a riddle that anybody would know what's in your pocket unless the answer is nothing. So I mean, it's one of those riddles where like logic, a computer would be stuck at kind of thing, and it's kind of the same thing. And there's a lot more Lords of the Rings reference, a lot more. I mean, we go to Magus, right? And Magus is just horse country.
He
Yeah,
throws in quite a few little nods to pop culture in this one.
a lot of stuff. We're gonna see. And okay, so this book specifically is the first time that he actually references the Robert Browning poem that this whole story is based on, and it's the first book in all 4 books that we've read where we actually get the first segment of that poem in an inscription in the very beginning of the book. And we get 3 inscriptions. We get one from the Wizard of Oz, we get one from Romeo and Juliet, William Shakespeare, and the last one, Child Roland to the Dark Tower Came, Robert Browning. And I'll read that little part because it's really like riddled, but it will play a part later on. I asked one draught of earlier, happier sights. I first, if could hope to play my part. Thanks first, fight afterwards. The soldier's art. One taste of the old times sets all to rights. The other 2 references, like I said, is Romeo and Juliet, which like at this point, Trev, you being the new reader, if you haven't kind of got what the Romeo and Juliet references, and the other one being Wizard of Oz, and I can kind of tell you we'll get to that reference at the end of the book. But yes, throughout the book, I mean,
You hear
again,
a little bit of it because don't they say also when they're looking down the road, they're walking down the road, right when they first get to Topeka, they can see.
he's already mentioned. They already mentioned Wizard of Oz with Kansas and Topeka. And, Susanna
Yeah.
brought it in, and Eddie, because that's one thing that's like known within Stephen King is all his characters for some reason are very literally smart. Like they're very well read characters. Like Jake, I mean, the books he's already mentioned reading that there's certain books I don't think I've read of the stuff he's read. But a lot of Stephen King like background characters and main characters are like that, where they're just literary, like smart and stuff like that. But
He
I
went
mean,
to
at
the
this
Piper
point,
Academy, so of course he's going to be well read.
yeah, Jake. But look at Eddie. Eddie read the damn Lords of the Rings. Eddie read The Hobbit. Eddie read Pride and Prejudice. Eddie read yeah, who in this group sees Eddie sitting there reading Pride and Prejudice? Like
He's a
he
ringer.
read what was the other book he read? There was another one he had brought up talking about Henry was making fun of him, and I was like, he did not read that book, but okay.
And this is also the first time in the story where King's really weaving in his other books too, isn't it?
Yes,
Eddie
okay,
watched
because
a
I
lot of
brought
movies too. Eddie watched a lot
Yeah.
of movies.
yes, he does. Yes. Okay. So, and I actually caught a reference to another book for the first time while reading this book, and it was The Library Policeman. There's a line that Jake mentions about like a librarian that would take kids into the bush and molest them, and that's kind of what that story is about. And I was like,
And is there-
oh,
I feel
Huh?
real bad. I wish I read Black House so bad. I have
I
got
did.
to get Black House. But
So
is there
so
anything
Phil,
in this that refers heavy to Black House in this part?
Black House explains like a heavy major part of the
Of
ending
Crimson King, right?
Yes, yes. And
Okay.
like, okay, so Talisman and Black House are heavily connected to this story. Like a lot of people that have read Talisman
I was just confused why they say read it first. Like the first book you should read is Black House.
No, I wouldn't say read it. No, I want to say I would read it before you get to like right after songs. No, before you get to the last book. As long as you read
Okay.
Black House, it
Huh.
kind of like fits in. But there are some books that heavily tie in. When I brought up one, Insomnia was written right before this book.
Insomnia. That was the other one.
which-
It's big.
Which
Just
I
read the
thought
books
was
you got, man. Just read the books you got.
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Okay. So let's move on. We're getting way off. We can talk about that another time. We haven't even talked about the Stephen King extended universe, but okay. So getting off the train, Norm Rad does bring us to something else, and I kind of brought it up in the little but we do stop at Topeka, Kansas, right? And Stephen King fans that have read the other books, I know Namman's a huge fan of this book. Myself, I'm pretty sure Steve is. Aaron, you a big Stan fan?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
That whole part of Topeka, Kansas is literally like lifted from the stand. Like literally our group got in this kind of mythical train, and somewhere along their path they went through a doorway and ended in the stand, I mean,
Well, I
and
don't know if I see it like that though. Like I might kind of more now kind of see it like that, but I think when I first read it, like I saw it as the stand leaked into Roland's world. There was
it could be
because
it could be
there's
either or.
there's thinnies there. They see the thinny like a mirage in the road, and I think because the thinny it came in to his world from the stand and just started wiping out his world. I think it already wiped out our world, but like you said, like it does show stuff from the stand, like the little flyers and everything they see.
Well, let me give you like a little clues to why I think it's a door versus the thinny. First, they run into the thinny after they get to Kansas. Like they're on the road, and that's when they start running into the thinny. But okay, that's just directional, right? When they were back on the train and they went through the part where Blaine had to power up and stuff, they literally went through like a station kind of, and that's where like Blaine had powered up and stuff. I want to say that's where I believe they went through like the door, and to incorporate that where we end up, they're off the path of the beam, and supposedly Blaine was
They know they're off
situated
track.
on the beam. So I want to say at some point, like without them knowing, like, and Blaine did not tell them, but they went through a door, and now it. But I could see it going the other way because we don't know a lot about them, and we're going to get there. But like, it's kind of one of the things we know they do. It's kind of like a very thin thing between reality. It's like two realities touching each other, then they're not supposed to touch.
It makes sense because they bring up doors again later with Jonas.
They did with Blaine too when they were leaving Lud. Remember, they were coming up on a wall and there was an opening in the wall. Now, was that the door? It's like, so they passed through it and then they were outside of Lud and then they were in that weird wasteland.
Now, okay, so Aaron, I want to say you're right about something else that we're coming to, because the end of this book and the Wizard of Oz reference, right? We do know that something else bleeds into this world, and I want to say, like, if I had to look at it like that way, the Thinny's on that side of it, so like that could be bled, and we like Topeka, Kansas, and the stand and everything. It's a world, right? But the place we come to at the end, and this is kind of because we haven't gotten there yet, Trev, I'm sorry, but like the place we get to the end of it kind of bleeds from somewhere else, like not exactly a world that we know of, kind of thing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to say that might be what the Denny, like, yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there. Okay, so right, Phil's right. Nerds.
There's
Cheney's saying, I read it that way. They ended up in the wrong place, being in Topeka, and it was Blaine screwing with them. And I want to say it just felt like that, and especially with the explanation, because they were supposed to be on the path of the beam. When they get off of Blaine finally after defeating him, they realize that they're like way off track, so off track that they can't even see the beam, kind of thing. Like at this point in the journey, yeah, on this point in the journey, we're not on the beam, and they can't see the beam. I don't know if I brought. Yeah, they're trying to get back to the beam, but they don't even know where, which direction. Roland just kind of was like, well, we're going to go that way.
Yep. Start walking, whichever way you feel.
Okay, so part two, the part two is titled Susan, the big stuff. Roland tells his quartet the story directly after becoming a gunslinger, sent west with Alan Johns and Cuthbert Algood to go to Magus under the disguise of the affiliation men to count for the coming war with the good man. The story starts with Rhea of the Coos, a glass ball with a pink glow, and a girl, Susan. Shortly after his quartet arrives, Roland, going by the name under disguise Will Dearborn, meets Susan, and it's love at first sight for both, learning quickly that Susan is arranged to the mayor of Magus. Roland, his quartet, also meet the Big Coffin Hunters, Eldris Jonas, Roy DePape, Clay Reynolds. Roland and his quartet, while counting, undercover a mystery involving horses and oil drums for the good man. Roland and Susan say, what the fuck, and fall in love despite the odds. And that's pretty much that whole chunk of the story. This one is so weird to break up in one. Okay, so.
And we can only say the pink grapefruit. We can't mention what it actually.
Not even.
Anymore.
Who said grapefruit?
Oh, we can't even say that, can we?
Now we can. Thanks, Eric. No, I'm playing.
Okay.
Okay.
That's what you had for breakfast, right?
So for reference, it is referenced as that color one time, but it's not specifically a name. But yes, at this point, it's a crystal ball that emanates a pink glow, and at this point, it has. I think it was Susan that said it had a grapefruitish color. And that was when she was describing it to Roland, I will point in. Okay, so my first question is, and this kind of goes into right before we were talking about this, what is a thinny? Why does this bridge the gap between the past and the present? Because in the past of the story, right, there's a thinny. In the present, there's a thinny. It's the first time in the story that this has happened to. Let's go with Namman. What you thinking about that, Namman? What's with the thinny? And why is it prevalent in the past and the present? Why is it the thing that's bridging the gap? Uh-oh.
I say, I mean, the thinning, they describe it as a saw, right?
Sounds Hawaiian.
The wobble, yeah.
Wobbling saw. I see, I don't know, I see thinning as something that's just breaking down, Yeah. It's like if you hit it at right frequency, it will just, the bridge, those bridges, they start waving at critical frequency. I think it's called critical frequency, and it hits
Oh yeah,
certain frequency, it will clash. You
it
know.
breaks. Yeah.
Yeah. So I see thinning as something like that where it's about to break, but
That's cool.
taking like a long ass time to break. You know.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought of that.
That's cool. It's like that bridge that had the wind that caused the resonance that matched
Right.
the
Right.
bridge,
Right.
and the bridge
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
literally shook itself to destruction because the
I always
resonance
think,
matched.
and I always think about
Ryan.
like, it's supposed
Hey,
to be
buddy.
an unbearable sound, like because they got to put stuff bullets into their ears,
Right.
you know.
Only
And
the magical
Gotcha, bro.
bullet works though.
Magical bullets, yep. And we find out that it's not just regular bullets to do it. It has to be something from Midworld, even though we've kind of already mentioned that this is like it's described as like a thin place between multiverses. So it's kind of weird that, but Arthur Eld, right? Excalibur.
Mhm.
All right, let's go with you, Trev, since you're right next to Nam. What you thinking about the thinnies and why? What do you have any thoughts on why King has the thinny in the past and then the present that they're coming to?
I was always envisioning like Stranger Things, like the rifts, but
Yeah.
not not fully open, but just like the start of a rift. I think that they exist outside of time.
I like that.
They're not only a doorway to different dimensions, but different times. That's why whenever they're close to there at the end, I was telling you backstage, did Roland have to get near one to access those memories from the past? Because the thinnies bridge time. So whenever he was by the thinny, it was kind of messing with him, and he had to say it because it was all coming back to him.
I like that, but how does that correlate to the past? Because they got the in our
His
reading.
past.
Well, no, I mean like okay, let's say the thinny, like once you get close to it, like since it operates at a time or whatever, and it's causing like Roland to generate this story because at this point, it is kind of like a mythical thing that's happening to Roland. Like he is telling his quartet the story. There's a reason for it, but it's not his reasoning. It's coming out of him like a flood, to the point where if he didn't tell a story, the story almost made it look like Roland was going to die, kind of thing. So like, okay, so I want to say your theory sounds great, but what about when like Roland and his group got close to the thinny in the past? Why didn't it have that effect? Maybe because they didn't have a path?
Yeah, maybe because they weren't the quartet yet. They weren't linked yet. Maybe it was. Maybe it's gotten worse. Maybe since their first time seeing one, now they're all the thingies are worse because it's just deteriorating.
Well, we do know that, and it's not shown the first time with the main group, and I'm that's kind of disrespectful to say that, but our main group would be Eddie, Jake, and okay, so when we go in like we see different versions of the thing,
Are you
right?
saying it's connected to Ka?
Yeah,
What?
exactly.
What? Okay, so what you talk about here? Man,
I don't know. From the past to the present, I don't know. Maybe that's just how Stephen King's always showing like a duality. He's always showing things through two different views. Like you see in the beginning of the story, you kind of see things through Jake's world, and then you see things through Roland's world. And so now with the thinny, you see the thinny from today's time, and then we're seeing the thinny from back then when Roland was young. So we're seeing the two different views of time.
So go back to like that first thing you said, and I'm thinking of this phrase that he keeps hinting at in this book a lot. Ka is the wheel.
Oh, the wheel keeps turning.
And it just keeps turning, and it even goes back to the point that it was before.
Okay.
So I want to say like you're 100%
It's gonna
right.
happen over and over. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the pit. Yeah, in my belief, that's exactly what King is trying to do with the Thinny in the past and the present. You know, not only do we have the Thinny in the past and the present, we have Roland with a full quartet. Even though his quartet in the past is smaller, considering their mission, it was a full quartet. Like that's the group that was picked to be sent out. You know, that number. Um, but it's kind of the same thing, right? And they're kind of coming across the same dilemmas. Kind of, you know, like you said, it's a reflection, and we see this duality, this yin and yang, a lot within the story,
And I
right?
don't know why. I'm sorry, and I don't know why, but every time I hear the Thinny, like I'm trying to remember if I read this in the beginning of the books or if it was later on. So I don't want to spoil nothing here, but I was just thinking about. I think it's where like Jake kind of sees like, you know, I'm kind of thinking of the movie there. Let me think. Where there's a great darkness or evil or whatever. Like if you go into the Thinny, you're gonna die. They say so. Like the Thinny is death.
So at this
So
point, that
I
hasn't
also
been discussed. Like the
I also
present.
see it as evil. So I also saw it like, is the Crimson King controlling the Thinnies? Is he causing
That's
them
food
to
for thought.
spread?
That's food for thought. Because like our good friend here, Cheney, and then he was like, it's a sign of the whole Dark Tower breaking down because the beams failing. It's that the world was healthy, there would be no Thinnies. I kind of have to agree that this is a fact of like the beams failing, the Dark Tower coming. You know, so it's kind of like that. But like I could also, I 100% kind of could see that too. That this is somehow like Crimson King magic, like, you know, his elements at play kind of thing. I could also like kind of casually at some point thought this was like Walter and his traps kind of thing. I mean, the Thinny kind of feels like a trap kind of thing, especially since like we see in the present day their interaction with the Thinny, because they're not so close to it, is like, you know, very limited and blah blah blah. It's even talked about very limited. But then we get the scene in the past, and they have to like almost like, you know, within arm's reach contact with this thing, to the point where they see tentacle like hands reach out of this thing and grab like a bird out of the sky and eat the bird. Well, not necessarily eat it. Well, kind of both, right? It eats it and just like ceases to exist. But like, you know, it's almost described as like a living thing, but that's like correlated to the past kind of thing. So I could kind of see that doing the Crimson King. Like,
First thing I thought when I saw that part was maybe the Thinny is pulling, something gets close to it, it pulls it into it, and it comes out in another place.
Okay,
so like all of Topeka got sucked into one of the Thinnies and it popped out in Midworld.
So we haven't mentioned this, but the Thinny is another thing that connects to other Stephen King books. And if you've seen the movie The Mist, Thinnies are in that movie. That's the monsters that are in The Mist actually come out of a Thinny. And to directly talk about what you just mentioned, you're 100% right. That then he does grab stuff and things do come out the other side. The problem is on the other side, we seen what's on the other side, and it's nothing nice. I mean, no, it's just a world full of like killing monsters and animals, and that's really what those tentacles and stuff are. It's like things they're trying to get out from the other side to that side for food or what have you, you know.
Null is coming.
Yeah. All right.
You notice that he stole a lot of stuff there from actually you directly referenced in the book there. This has all happened before and this will all happen again. He put that in there. I read that line and I started laughing. I'm going, you bastard, you stole that right from Battlestar Galactica. That's from the Cylons. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. The Thinnies, the other side of the Thinny.
Okay, but he pays homage. He pays homage to Battlestar Galactica like a ton. The horse's name is Pylon. Come on now. There's like 5 different references to Battlestar Galactica in this book. So he didn't just rip it, he used it. Let's say that.
Used
and I love that a horse Go ahead.
Those creatures on the other side, that's who the Crimson King is working for.
I was
Not the
wondering
other way
what
around.
the horse names were from.
Ooh.
Those monsters
Yeah.
want to come through. They want the tower to collapse. They want the beams to fail so they can take over. Null is coming.
And I believe you're 100% right on that. Well, just to some degree, right? To imagination degree, I would say, but that's where my thoughts will be leaning. All right, so Pylon is a direct reference to Battlestar Galactica. I mean, in this world, we do not use the term pylon that often, especially as far as a name goes, and that name of a horse. No, but that's what that is. And Francesca, I used to know the reference to that horse, and I'm forgetting, but it's a literary, it's a famous horse from another book. I'm leaning towards the Black Stallion, but that's not it.
His name was Trigger.
I had no idea.
Man.
So you just said that just now.
Yeah. So okay, so far,
Galactica.
and Norrin had brought up the fact that this is kind of the book where we start getting a lot more crossover to Stephen King universe. We get The Mist, we get The Stand. I brought up The Library Policeman, the Walking Verse, which is the long
And so
walk.
this is also when you're reading through, like, now is when I started realizing, okay, now I need to look out for these kind of things.
I think at this part in the book, as a new reader, when I was reading through, this is where, like, I think it was the Stand reference, and I started noticing that he was crossing over to other books, and that's what got me excited to read the other books that tied into the series. You know, learning that there was more information besides the 7 books that we had, or at that time it was like 3 books or whatever. That I was like, whoa, Roland's in another story, or the bad guy's in another story. Like, learning that the Man in Black crosses over to like multiple King stories is one of my favorite things. I love Walter, or whatever you want to call him. All right, so I got a big one. We're talking about villains, so let's talk about one of my favorite villains, and one that doesn't get brought up enough. But who is Rhea the Coos? What role at this point does she play? And how does she compare to other villains that we've come across in this story? And Trev, you being the new reader, I'm jumping on you, buddy.
Really intriguing, bringing magic. We haven't really had a villain that is all magic.
Kind of.
I think she kind of has her teeth in the village, being the only one, being the soothsayer, and everybody having to get tested by her for their womanhood. She's a wise woman, but everybody's scared of her. So it's a pretty cool dynamic as far as nobody's really willing to go attack her or anything because they're kind of scared of her.
As far as the town goes, she's referenced like very little, and to the point where, like, you know, they're like they don't even want to go talk to her. Like Sheriff, the only other reference from the town we get is from the sheriff, and he gets that headache medicine from her. But like, other than that, besides the big coffin hunters, like nobody else deals with her, and the only reason they have to is because they're getting paid to.
Yeah, and then she's always going to have her teeth, like she does them a favor, but she gets her teeth in, and whenever she tells Susan,
I totally just envision her like the Snow White witch.
She's described as such by Susan, like that fairy tale. Like, I always envisioned the witch from Hansel and Gretel that would bake at the oven or whatever. Like, I always thought she was a little more grotesque, living in the woods all by herself or whatever, eating little kids. I think she was a little more scary to me than the Snow White, like just looking in the mirror trying to be pretty.
I think she's the Wicked Witch of the West. I envision that from Oz.
They say that she looks. I mean, in a couple different instances that she looked, good if she, took care of herself and stuff. But then she gets a scowl on her face. And
when she looks at the ball, it shows her face when she's young.
That's right.
Yeah,
evil though.
Because I was like, that's not. Because I was right. I was gonna say that's not exactly right. We see when she's around the ball like actually has this magic that actually casts. Like, it actually makes her younger, but we see otherwise. We see that this thing is literally like feeding her, like is literally draining her life force to the point where she even feels it And she don't even care. She's all like, I can feel this tingling in my bone, No,
Direct
no thing.
reference of the ring.
Yeah,
Right?
right. That's what I was
Rings.
I have Sauron, maybe. Huh?
Mhm.
Steve. Oh no, let's go with you, Aaron. What you thinking about Rhea, the Coos, and
This is just the ultimate Stephen King villain. It's like Pennywise. It's like in it. It's one of the one of the big monsters of the book.
It's one of the first times we come across one of his villains that's really grotesque. You could kind of say Sylvia Pliskin, but this is like Sylvia Pliskin times like 100, kind of, minus the Red King aspect, because she might be on the level of Crimson King. I don't know. Steve, what you got to throw into that?
She is a first class freaking sociopath, man. She's like pure evil. Nothing. The only pleasure she gets is from misery of others. Just pure evil.
Well, how about her plan? Her plan that kind of got backfired by Roland because it was there. But what about the whole in the buildup of this plan? I remember being the first time reader and going into that and being like, that's what she told Susan to do, just cut off some of her hair, and
Yeah,
like,
being
oh,
spiteful
okay,
that way.
yeah. I
Was
thought
that
it was
it?
gonna be, yeah, it
Something
was.
more drastic, right? But it's just seems like a foolish prank. But
Yeah,
that's something that
Well,
young
what
girls
does the
they love
hair
their hair.
signify? Does the hair
Well,
signify?
so we come from a culture where we've learned that status and pride and all that play bigger parts than a lot of other stuff, because we learned that from the Gabrielle and Martin thing, that it
Mhm.
was more shameful, to act like that in the royal courts and stuff like that. So in this world, like her damaging her hair with the mayor like that would have been more damaging, say, if she would have been programmed to kill him, or something like that, because it's a society based on pride
it
and
would
shame and stuff like
hurt
that.
his status.
hmm His gilly, as the book says, would have been
Yep.
so pretty. But I always thought, like, when we finally found out what that plan was, I was like, that's it from this crazy witch. That's I thought she was gonna program to kill herself, the baby, the mayor, like death somewhere in there, and it was just like, hey, you're just
Jeez.
gonna cut off your hair.
She obviously needed that town too, to supply her with all of her stuff, so she can get away with doing little silly pranks like that to satisfy her evilness. But she wasn't going to go to that point.
Hey, you do bring up a valid point, and she does bring up that a lot of times that she didn't want to piss off the mayor, and that's probably
They're
valid.
powerful people.
Yeah, that even though they feared her, she probably didn't want a whole Frankenstein villager thing, pitchforks at her door.
No, and they even had her. She said she was afraid of Eldris, and then when she saw Roland, she was terrified of him too.
Yeah.
Namman, you with us? Namman, you there? He might not be with us.
Stand clear of the
Any-
doors, please.
Look
Anybody
into
else
his
have?
eyes.
Anybody else have? I've
Her
been staying the
cat
whole
with
time.
the extra legs sticking out the sides, and
The snake, and how she
Dude,
opens the box, like she literally poisons herself, like, and that's part of the whole, like, like opening that special box thing, because if you don't like caress the snake, that thing's gonna just bite you with its 4 different fangs, not 2 fangs, but 4 fangs.
they didn't explain why she has the box yet, right?
No,
Okay.
just that she has her little hidey hole, and that's where the grapefruit is hiding at the moment.
I did love that cat though. She was like, she's all trying to concentrate. The cat's like meow, getting up, and she's like, God, get off me! And then she kicks the cat into the fire.
And then uses her magic and lights
She
the fire
lit
up.
that thing on fire. Yeah,
Right.
she threw it in the fireplace, and there was no fire.
They do
She
tell why she has it. I
Hilarious.
don't
do
want to
it.
spoil it.
It's later. It's later. We'll get there. We'll get
Yeah.
there. For this part of the story, like, and I kind of remember, like, honestly, I thought we got a lot more Rhea of the Coos in this part.
She lives
of
in
the
a swamp,
book.
like a death swamp.
All right, so let's move on to the next question. We learn the deal between Mayor Thorne and Susan. What would have been the consequences of not going through with the deal? Why is it so like bad? Like if she would have just said no, like I don't want to go through the
Because
problem. What would have been the consequences of
I
her
know,
not going through with the deal?
I
Let's
know.
go with you, Aaron. Let's go with you, Aaron. Go hit us.
Susan wanted the land of her father.
Yeah, but is that so bad? Like, let's say they didn't get the land
If
of their father.
she didn't become the mayor, then she would lose the land and the horses, and then she would
In
lose it
this,
all.
at this point in the story, all they had, they're basically renting. They're renting that house from the mayor. They don't know the house has already been taken away. All their horses are. She's slowly getting them back as presents, but like at this point in the story, that's the promise is they're going to get like the land that they used to own, which isn't the house they're in right now. It's that's at a different location. I forget who's living at that location. I think that's Avery's character, or I don't
And
remember.
this was the part where like Stephen King's really painting the background. Like you're really getting a good picture of what everything looks like around.
Magus and Hambry.
Which is
Steve,
where it did so good in the graphic novels through this part.
oh, I didn't brought this up, but and yes, this is where the comic book series actually starts is with Wizard and Glass. They're doing this. They do the whole prequel story first in the
Yeah,
comics.
they do. Yeah.
And I don't know why the movie chose to do what it did. If the movie would have started right here, man, this is where the movie should start. To me, it's like Roland's past. Like,
Yeah, but it might have been a bit of a boring movie though, because there's so much freaking detail in this. And,
Yeah.
I mean, there is action and stuff, but people would have been pissed. It would have been like watching Eternals.
Because that is a comment that Trev brought up earlier during this. He's not such a big fan of this book so far, you know. And
well,
a lot.
like if they made the beginning Roland becoming a gunslinger, beating Court, like starting the movie there, and then ending the movie with Susanna getting burned, and that's like the end. That's
Work.
I think that would bring on. Well, what happens after that? That would be everybody would be like, what's the next movie going to be? What's the next good movie going to
Are
be?
you spoiling stuff?
We're off topic.
Sorry.
And look, and that is brought up a lot. This, I mean, I want to say that applies to every single book. It could be either their favorite or the most hated book in the series for each individual because a lot of people love the individual and a lot of, I mean, me personally, I love every single part of this story. There's not a single book that I dislike.
I mean, this is a Western romance. Like the majority of this part of the book is a Western
100%.
romance.
It is, and something that I brought up before. There's a method to his books. It's a story. There's action. There's story. There's action. And right now we're halfway during this track with the book. So this book is pretty much like half story and half action. You know, I mean, it's all story. It's a book, right? But I mean, and Trav, you haven't seen that part of the book, but I could tell you we're getting to. I mean, the first part of this book is again nothing but setup because we're meeting all these new characters. We're in a whole new location. We're with a brand new Roland, a younger Roland. You know, I mean, it is a lot of story buildup. But you know, it's interesting because when we do this part 2, it's going to be interesting hearing your thoughts when we get to that part of the book because I can see how it can quickly change to, man, I love that book kind of thing.
But
so
another consequence of if Susan don't go follow through, she has the nasty aunt.
Cordelia.
That's right, Cordelia. That Jonas is, yeah.
Petunia? Was it
Cordelia.
Yep. She got her claws into Susan really hard and has brainwashed her into doing this so she can get everything back that was taken away in the first place.
For herself, not for self.
Again, it's status too, right? It's you know, that Susan has fond memories of her father and that farm and everything, and that town is her life. And then her evil aunt comes along who's a money grubber and just wants the money, has brainwashed her into doing this stuff. And yeah, they could have just walked away from all that. It would have been fine, but she got brainwashed. And now she has a sense of duty because her father imparted that hard into her life.
Yeah,
When
the
you say your
promise.
word, you follow through with your word. So she's given her word and she's trapped, and she feels trapped because of that.
Oh, pride.
Hmm.
They've also
Um,
paid. They've also paid the witch. They paid Rhea. They paid what,
gave
like
some
2
of their
gold,
Well,
horses
they
2
paid.
back.
silver, and something else.
Cordelia's got a lot of money from it already because evidently we're seeing some of the gifts, but some of the gifts have already been gotten before the whole test, because she
Yeah,
had
but what
like
does
so.
Susanna have?
Well, that's what I'm talking about because Susanna had the blouses. Remember, she's already Pylon was a gift, and
Even though it was her own horse, they just took everything. They stole it all from her
yeah,
after her father died.
and when we come into the story, she already has Pylon, but um. It was just gifts that she had gotten previously right before. We don't know how far back this had started, but I want to say at least a year, maybe it feels like something
Yeah,
like
because
that.
her father hadn't been dead that long.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And it probably was arranged right around that time, maybe, or shortly after, because it seems, I mean, there had to been some time where all the horses were taken, their land was taken, that kind of thing. Because it's even expressed in the story that Cordelia wasn't there the whole time, that it was,
Oh,
Susan
she
and her
showed up
dad.
after the fact. Yeah,
Hmm.
because he had died to take care of her niece. Horny old mayor.
Yeah, darn. Um, okay, so this is actually for really the constant readers, but because this is a very small, minute detail, I don't know if anybody notices, but we're going to go back to Rhea the Coos for a second. And in our very first meeting of Rhea the Coos, we get a brief little time with Rhea, right? I mean, it's like 2 whole chapters with her, and we kind of come back to her at different parts of the story. But in the opening scene with Rhea, with the crystal ball, one scene before Rhea meets Susan, Rhea turns and looks at a picture of a young boy. Any thoughts on who that young boy is, or why the turn to the young boy? It's not even something I mentioned the first time reading through with Rhea. That she even had this picture, and the description in that picture is she stopped and longingly looked at a picture of a young boy within a framed picture. Any thoughts on that? Especially to my constant readers who know further on in the Rhea story. This one's a free for all. There's no.
Does she come from Eyes of the Dragon?
No. I wish that would have been cool.
Okay.
Yeah, it's got to be a love of her life from the past, and obviously some tragedies befallen that
I like
person,
that.
and that's made her into the miserable wench that she is now, and it started her down that path for whatever circumstances, for her to have that heartfelt feeling of longing when she looks at the picture, right? That's something in the past that she, that's a feeling that's long gone when her life now says she's consumed by just rage and evil and bitterness.
It was
Maybe
a
it's a
catalyst.
child.
Like it was. Oh, go ahead.
Maybe it's a child.
That's kind of my thoughts. So
Or
elaborate.
kid, lost kid.
Yeah, maybe a lost kid or something. Or
She had a son.
I also had like a couple other funny thoughts. Like, I mean, we had brought up the man Jesus, so I was thinking maybe how ironic would it be to her, kind of casually looking at her picture of the man Jesus, and the way it's talked about. It's even I don't know. It's even set up like on a pedestal on the wall, and there's just this picture of a young man or young
Like a
boy.
shrine, right?
Yeah, kind of,
So,
and that's like
oh,
it's got candles. A bit of one thought, and then there was another like really really funny thought I always had reading this, but like maybe it was somebody like Elvis or like Tupac or like somebody that's like ideally like famous, and like why would but like because it's one line in the book, it's so quick, and I never even caught it because when you and Trev, you're just getting into Red, but like what we know from Red, she's one of the best villains. I mean, no. So when we get there, kind of thing. What's up, Utak?
now evil. Think about this. You're onto something with the Jesus thing, right? Because what she does later, remember, she's all wasted away, and what she does to
Yeah,
revitalize
okay.
herself. Little
Okay,
Sisters of Illyria.
Okay,
Right?
so
What
that's
were they?
kind of why. Okay, so that's why I go back to that, and the way
Yeah,
it's
you're
set
onto
up.
something.
Like, okay, and one last thought. In this book, it's referenced 4 times, I think. It might be 3, so don't quote me. But okay, they mentioned the Mannyfolk again. They've
Yeah.
talked about the Mannyfolk, and the Mannyfolk are pretty important for a couple different things. Kef is majorly water if God wills it, kind of thing.
Yep.
I kind of had this small thought that maybe it was like a picture of like this Manny tribesman that maybe looked like David Koresh or something, and ironically, that's been brought up a couple times. The whole David
Would you
Koresh
like
thing
some
with the Kool-Aid,
You want
right?
the Kool-Aid?
And it kind of fits the character. Like, who would a villain idolize, right? I mean, we
Yeah.
had the TikTok man looking for the Nazis, I mean, so like, maybe she was looking for this like like bestowed villain or something. I don't know, just thoughts. Anybody
cool.
else want to throw in their thoughts in the pool? Nah, all right.
Yeah, but that was cool though. Now I'm thinking about Little Sisters of Illyria. Maybe she was one of that crew, and then she
I
took off
didn't think of that, but that could be, and there is
because
a lot
of what
the,
she did later to revitalize
yeah,
herself.
yeah.
I'm like, holy crap, man! She can't be one of
Okay.
them, is she? Or she just knows that magic. I don't know. There's something there. You're on it. You're pulling on a thread there.
I'm telling you, in the scene, it looks like it's referenced as she's looking at like, I was thinking maybe a child. Like, I think the first time I read it, but when actually highlighting and putting the notes and stuff, I was like, well, maybe it's like, like the way we have other pictures in the house. I mean, for all we know, it could be like Spider-Man or something, like, great power comes great responsibility. And she turned and was like, yeah,
It's the picture that came with the frame.
Right. Could be that
something
too.
from frickin' Costco
Yeah,
or
dude, no,
Walmart or
the
some
fuck it
shit.
is.
And it's something as base as she uses it to do her business with.
One
The Sears
time,
catalog.
like right when you said that, okay, so maybe it is like one of those Costco pictures, but like how crazy would it be? It's Jake in New York. Like
That'd
it's
be funny.
Jake in New
Right?
York, like crossing the street or whatever.
Oh,
I don't know.
All
All right, we're
that's
going
good.
places with that. All right, so okay, so Kaz featured heavily in this story. Talk about the hidden ways King has put it in the background, because in this story it's pretty prevalent in the front ground, with the cause of wind, and it's just gonna take me. And I mean, that's brought up like 4 times with Susan, Cordelia, Roland. Okay, but
It'll come like a cyclone.
yep. Okay, but in the background there is a lot of Ka going on. One that we've even referenced without even having this question out there, and I'll bring that out there with the cat being thrown into the damn fire. Rhea was about to see something of great importance, and right as she was about to see it, the cat hops up in her lap. Bam. Okay, so let's talk about some other for instances when King has thrown Ka in the background. And I'm gonna let's go with you, Aaron. You're right there.
So you're talking. This is when Susanna's coming and scared the cat, messed her up. She had to put up the ball. And Susanna comes and she's mad at Susanna because she was trying to see what she could see.
She was like 45 minutes
But-
early, right? And why did she take off
Yeah.
running? Because the moon told her to, or whatever.
Oh, so Ka was working. Okay, I see where he's getting. So, okay, yeah, I see that now. Ka
Steve,
connected that.
you want to throw down something you might have noticed while reading?
This has all happened before, and this will all happen again. No, I'm percolating on this one too. Yeah, but you're right though. Cause just interrupting at the exact right time every single time.
I'll
It's
give
like
you
the whole
another
thing
reference.
is choreographed. It's all meant to happen in a certain way and flow in a certain way. And things aren't going that way. We'll just give you a little edge here and a little edge there to make sure you're on the right path. Oh, path of the beam. That sounds like something that's going on here. Yeah,
So how about? Go ahead, Trev.
What about being in the right place at the right time? Whenever Susan rode out to cry, and Roland was in his place meditating and saw her.
And what about Susan at Rhea and going to get some firewood and takes a wrong turn and happens to see Rhea with the glass ball? Or yeah, with the box emitting the light, you know. But how about negative Ka? Now we talked about yin and yang, right, and duality, but what about that other side of Ka? I mean, we have an example of a whole nother quartet in our midst, right? We got the big coffin hunters, right? And let's bring up a good example multiple times in this book where Ka's not only helping out our group, but is also helping out their group as well. Because we get this dude named Roy DePape who has to go back and he has to travel the back trails looking to figure out who these three young boys are, right? And he just happens to come across this town that he had already passed. He had already went to a whole, he went back to New Canaan, like a whole nother 60 miles out, went to that town, didn't find nothing, and then came back to that town. And for some reason stopped at the worst bar that was in that town. And sure enough, some dude had recognized Roland as the descendant of Arthur Eld, you know. That one, for instance, but on Call reflected on that. How about when DePape was coming back and Roland's just happened to be trotting along after having a nice night with Susan and happens to be at the right location at the right time when DePape is coming back into town and learns of DePape before he actually gets back to his quartet.
Yeah.
Ka is at play like a MF in this book, like you wouldn't believe. But what about a snake fan we brought up? Multiple times Ray is looking at the ball and about to see something nice and privy. And not just the cat, but the snake does it as well. Almost to the point where he bites her leg and she's just immune to the poison. She don't even feel it, kind of thing.
Yep. It's just, again, another reference to Battlestar Galactica. You know, the gods are working for the Cylons and they're also working for mankind at the same time. It doesn't show any, they don't care if good or evil. It doesn't mean anything to them.
There we go. Another one loves them. Anybody else that wants to throw down some Ka references they might have noticed in the background? I did in the group chat put the multiplications of 19 because I don't know how many of y'all reference that. Like, for instance, did anybody notice that when they were horse counting, all the derivatives were derivatives of 19 off by 10? Off by 10. So like the horses they saw, there was 960. Well, the derivative of 19 would have been 950. And Roland even states, give or take 10. He had it down to the count, and they were all multiples of 19. Have you started picking up on that kind of stuff in the book, Trev?
No.
like maybe there was 19 working oil derricks.
I did catch that. That was obvious.
No, I mean I have 19, but not minus 10.
Yeah, not the minus 10 one though.
Okay, the town has exactly 15 streets plus 4 dirt roads. It has 19 streets in total. I don't know. Okay, but it's just like a side thing. But I want to say this is like where King started to lay a lot more of the 19 down, kind of in the background. Now, some of it's like the oil derricks. It's there in the front. But I think that there's many references where you just start counting the things that either Roland's noticing or stuff like that. Namman, do you have any references where Ka is referenced in the background? Ka is pretty prevalent in the foreground, like the Romeo and Juliet thing with Susan and Roland. What about Ka in the background?
I don't.
Like how convenient is it that like the one girl that Jonas kind of wants eventually just happens to meet at this party, and they just happen to both like each other? Like Cordelia actually thinks that Eldris Jonas is handsome and kind of pretty, when the whole rest of the town is described as he's either old or haggardly looking or like
skinny.
even yeah, even his crew says he looks like death sometimes.
I
How about
see him
Team?
as I do in the graphic novels. Or the graphic novels draw him out.
By the
Shows
way,
all
the graphic
all
novel is
the top
supposed to be
hunters.
Yeah, they make them look pretty wild.
graphic
I
novels.
love the part when they're playing cards and you see the tattoos on their hands and it says the tattoos can dance like magic.
Yeah, they moved. Yeah.
By the way, graphic novel is supposed to be extension stories, not part. I mean, that's not in the books. So
Yeah, it's all the stuff in between.
yeah.
Hmm.
Fills in all the cracks.
Hmm. All right, so let's move on. Move. Let's see. All right, what's with the Rook Skull? We meet our friend Alan Cuthbert, and he is dedicated to this Rook Skull to the point where Roland hates this thing, demands that he hides it, knocks it out of the way. Like, I mean, like, any thoughts on why this dude carries a Rook Skull, what it signifies, metaphorically, whatever you want to. What are your thoughts on the Rook Skull, and why is it predominantly featured so much within the story? Now, it will play a part to the ending of the book. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the stuff that we read in this part of the book. This dude just carrying a Rook Skull, like it's with him all the time. Any thoughts? Let's go. Let's go with Steve.
Holy crap. Yeah, that one I never really paid too much attention. I thought it was just Cuthbert being Cuthbert, because he's just being an idiot, messing around. Like he found this thing and says, "Oh, this will be fun just to talk to it," because he's talking to it like a third party all the time. He calls it the Lookout. He throws it on the pommel of his horse all the time, and then he wears it around his neck too at one point because he had it on a thong or something. He was wearing it around his neck.
When they go meet the sheriff,
Yeah,
it's supposed to be a formal.
I thought something to it, but I never picked up what it was yet.
Yeah, I never went anywhere deep into it except for exactly what Evil was saying towards the end. It came up.
He does focus on it when he's writing that part.
It does a lot. I want to say in this book, in the part we just read, it's referenced 28 times during the story.
So it's like in with the drawing of the three, or with the skull, and at the way station with the skull too. So it's probably something along those lines,
Trev, you got any thoughts? Or Namman?
What Steve
I don't
just
have
said, I
anything
was
on that
thinking.
either. I didn't really pay attention to that. But have you guys noticed that Roland in this series? I mean, of course he's young and he's just new gunslinger. But have you noticed he constantly goes after reaches for his gun, but then realizes it's not there. I mean,
4 times.
Old Roland would not have ever done that, right? I mean, the
Old Roland does once during the tale. It's after he gave the gun to Eddie, and it's really because it's the first time he's been without his guns. That it makes sense to this part. But I get where you're going at. Roland being like an apprentice gunslinger, like him being this early on in his gunslinging, like is his training that detail where he would be reaching for his gun that much, just getting his gun? I get where you're going.
Yeah, I mean, it's not part of his body right now at the moment.
Yeah, like his natural movement.
Yeah, I mean, it should be the gun. His gun is a extension of his body, right? But at the moment, it's not. If it's not there, he should already know it's not there.
Like a ghost limb syndrome.
I want to say generally I like that part of the story, the dynamic that they don't have their guns, because we're getting to see gunslingers use different tactics other than the gun thing. Because at this point in the story, if they would have did that scene with the big coffin hunters, they just would have blew them away, like no contest. Like, especially the way they got them off guard. And
the slingshot's pretty cool though, isn't it?
Oh, I love the slingshot.
How deadly that thing can be.
And then, I mean, we didn't see it, but he was traditionally like telling the truth. If things would have gone sour, that ball would have gone through that dude's head, and probably left a good sized hole,
just like a bullet.
Yeah. Okay, so going back to the Rook thing, I'll give you like some little food for something that maybe we forgot about, but like we're gonna go all the way back to the first book, right? And with Hacks the Cook, and Roland went to the hanging of this Hacks the Cook with the guy, and there were these
Bird
birds, yeah, they were flying around with Hacks the Cook,
with
and it's the
Trev.
one. It's told during that story that it traumatized this one guy so bad that he didn't want to be there, and eventually Roland made him stay. And when he turned back, all he could focus is on were the rooks that were eating Hacks the Cook, and remember the bread, and
Yep.
that's the reference to the rook skull. He literally carries it around like the thing you fear or the thing you're scared of the most, like it kind of thing. It's like hidden in the background, but
Interesting.
that's
Missed
and
it.
That
well,
makes sense.
it's actually brought up twice and by Cuthbert to Roland in the story, where he references, hey, remember Hacks the Cook? But he
Yep.
brings it up in like a jokingly way, and guess what, we find out our guy, that's his armor, right? They use jokes to, like, at the scarier moments kind of thing.
Yep.
Thanks,
That's
Squish
cool.
Whips. um yeah, but that I want to say that, I mean, there could be like more, because nothing is known, but I want to say, like, within the reading, that's like my understanding of, because it is heavily referenced and there is no kind of knowledge on why. I always thought like it was something like that, but it always didn't fit because we don't see Eddie do anything like that, and they're referenced as being similar kind of thing, but like it's never referenced as like where, if it was like a joke towards like the quartet, right? I mean, they don't really find it funny. They don't find it to a point where it's irritating or anything. Where like Roland kind of sees it more as like him wearing a bad shirt. Like, man, don't wear that thing out in public, kind of thing. Like, it's not like taboo. It's really weird when it comes to the Rook.
What if he's also wearing it because they're undercover, as kind of like to make them seem less than they are?
Childish.
Yeah,
I could
childish
go
or
with that.
just non-disciplined or just not as cunning and proper as and well trained as they are.
We do know their whole attire, the way they look, even though the town still deems them rich folk and this and that. Their whole like look and attire and everything they have on them was picked by their fathers. Like their whole appearance and everything is a disguise. It's not.
Disguise.
Yeah, it's not something they were. Even though they still look gunslinger-ish, like it's still like a disguise to them. Even though it doesn't work with Hambry, they still like,
They're
they're
supposed to
still
like
like,
rich, spoiled brats, right? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's what they
they're
want to
supposed.
be portrayed as.
Everybody thought
Yeah,
they were trouble boys. They
Yeah.
because
got
the whole
got
backstory is that they were drunk, and one of their friend, they all got in a race with their horses,
Be
and one of their
drunk at
Started
friends,
getting.
like,
15. That's crazy.
yes, like
Out racing horses.
They were
stepped in a
turnpiking,
hole.
baby. They were turnpiking.
Yeah, but that whole part of the story is just messed up. Whether really there is because like Stephen Deshane is worried for his son. He thinks Martin the Sorcerer is out to kill him. Not only that, but he thinks John Farson is out to kill him. So basically, they're just sent there for hiding. They're not there to do anything. They're not. This whole like mystery and conspiracy that they've stumbled upon. That's Cobb, baby. That's
Caught like a Emma effer.
right place, right time. Okay, so let's get on to the next question. I only got a couple more. Um, so the tale of Magus Hambry begins under a kissing moon and ends on a demon moon. We're told. How does the changing of the moon reflect the novel's darkening atmosphere?
Oof.
Trev, you're up, buddy.
Darkening atmosphere.
As we go through the story, so far in this point, we've seen the changing of the moon 4 times. Hunter's moon, peddler's moon, kissing moon, and we're about to get to another one. But each stage of the step, the stories get a little darker and a little, you know. Any thoughts?
Um,
If you
I
don't,
don't
it's
know.
fine.
Getting closer to the demon moon, it's like more of the negative call happens. So like the one dude found out about them, stumbling across the one guy that he happens to stumble across that knew Roland's dad.
Mhm.
So and then Susan's aunt, knowing, like, she knows, she can't put her finger on it, but she knows that Susan's changed.
Yeah, that part I thought she was literally going to come out and like, especially after that was like the first time her and Susan did the nasty or whatever. Usually women are known to like spot those kind of things, and even in the
Mhm.
story, it's referenced that she like noticed something, but not fully, kind of thing. Like you
Yeah, she
wouldn't
was too
notice, like a
distracted,
16-year-old.
right?
Yeah, she
Yeah,
was
right.
her own giddiness, right?
Ka. Shimi was
Yeah, that's all
the
I got.
Ka there too that stopped that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Namman, you got any thoughts on the changing of the moons reflecting to the darkening of the story?
I mean, only thing that I could think of is it's a kind of foretelling, like the what do you call those things?
I don't know.
Fortune globe.
What?
Hmm?
Magic 8 Ball.
No.
The crystal balls?
Yeah, when the she
Like a fortune teller?
no, that little glass ball.
Yep, the pink one.
Oh, with Rhea. I got you.
Yeah. So I mean, it's like symbolically, just foretelling what's coming. Just like the looking into crystal ball.
All right, all right.
Well, didn't they also use it as a way to tell time there? Like, or
They did.
because that's how Rhea told Susanna when she could get impregnated.
I was
It was all
wondering if anybody wondered, like, during the Huntress moon, we got like Roland going after Susan and Susan going after Roland. Like, that's kind of the part of the story when like everybody's going after somebody. Jonas is doing this. Okay, and then we get the Peddler's moon. What does the peddler do? They try and sell stuff, right? And then like the Peddler's moon, like, that's when like Roland's trying to convince Susan to do the whole like love, thing, and yeah, it's not a lot of convincing, right? She does deny him twice, and Nam, I've been waiting. Where's our biblical references?
Biblical references.
You ain't got
there
no
was
biblical reference.
Not
Is
there
that
today.
was a couple.
Hmm?
yeah, that's one of them. Is the Susan denying Roland twice is like a Adam and Eve reference. Um,
And then we got the snake in the garden.
Snake
yep,
in the
yeah,
garden.
we got the whole story in the background about the Lord of Perth, right?
Yep.
Oh, well then. Let me go
Yeah,
back to
come on,
that.
Nam.
David
Let
and
me go back to
Goliath.
that picture. It could be a fallen angel too, right?
Oh, I like that too. Um, no, but I don't know if they're okay. So, but during all these cycles, there are like whatever cycle the moon is at. Like I mentioned, the Huntress moon. That's kind of when all our shakers and movers are doing things. The Peddler's moon, like, and then we know we're leading up to this demon moon, and that we already hear talks, and it's probably. For a constant reader, it's probably the saddest line I read in this part was them making Susan the what is it the reap fair queen or whatever, or like she'd be the brightest at the reap fair,
Right.
and we and we kind of know that from the last book, and this isn't, Stephen King kind of spoiled this, but we do know that she burns. um yeah, so that kind of
She's the
I read
brightest,
that
all
line.
right.
Yeah, I read that line and I was like, damn, Susan, damn.
It's not. It's sort of like Stephen
God.
King is like a freaking making fun of Susan.
Yeah, but it's how you
Sure,
mix
just
her
light
in
up.
too. She went out with style, man.
Hey, we're not there yet. We're not there. Yeah, but no kidding. I mean, they were talking about like she had like 5 dresses that she had to wear, one secret one that she was gonna wear for like the whole like,
Bow,
let's just
chicka,
say,
bow, chicka, bow,
coronation,
bow.
um, and then we find out in Geely that that was nothing. And they go through like 9 and had like the 2 secret options on the side or whatever. Like, I don't know. All right. So, anybody else have anything they want to add into the moon cycles? There is one thing I'd like to reference because um, my thought goes into one of my favorite games, and it's kind of funny because this book references games quite a bit with the castles game, which is like
Yeah,
our version of chess.
the
They
card game.
reference the card game, they reference the dice game, and they reference the riddling. Okay, so one of my favorite games of all time is the sequel to Ocarina of Time, the Legend of Zelda, which is Majora's Mask. And in Majora's Mask, you start out the game, and the whole object of the game is you're trying to turn back time so the moon doesn't crash into the earth. In that game, the moon is the enemy, and literally you go through these cycles of the moon, and it changes like the Huntress. But and ironically, it kind of came out around the same time. I don't know.
And it
But
is
just go look at
ironic too that the fact that our moon here too affects tides, it affects water. And what are human beings made out of mostly?
water.
And then you get people to turn into what, lunatics at certain
Hmm.
phases of
Hmm.
the moon, and they lose their minds, and it's like we're ruled by the moon cycles.
Being
Our
an
moon.
EMT for 10 years, I can tell you that full moons and all that kind of stuff, that those are the funnest nights.
Mhm.
Um, no, but I'm pretty sure policemen, firemen, all that can attest to the
100%.
moon, making people go crazy kind of thing, and the science is there, right? Like you said, I mean, if the gravity from the moon is controlling the tides and stuff, why wouldn't it affect clouds, everything else with water?
Gee, the tower.
Yeah, the tower. All right,
The tower.
very last question, and I love this question. The very last line of the book is Roland says that true love is boring. What are your thoughts on true love is boring? And it's literally the last line of the book. And it's a dot dot dot, like it's a continuation. He says more to that sentence. So to find out what he would say, you would have to actually read past where we were supposed to stop to hear what the rest of that is. But that's the last line of this part is Roland says to the group after they stop, and he literally stops to drink a glass of water. I didn't bring up this, but this is the interlude. Roland takes a break to take a drink, and Eddie notices the time. It looks like it's literally been like maybe months have passed, even though to them it's been like a night. But Roland explains that that the nights aren't moving the same. We've already known that the time is moving on and stuff like that. But we've kind of already seen this before, that during a palaver, there's this kind of magic that happens, and not just while Roland palavers. It's happened with Walter, but there seems to be like when someone in this story is telling a story, all time around them stops. And that's kind of Eddie kind of perceives that and lays that on as the readers. But the very last line that we get in this part is Roland takes a break, he takes a sip of the water, he gets back to the story, and he says, "True love is boring." Any thoughts into why true love is boring?
That's kind of a good point Shani brought up in chat, is it doesn't make a good story, and that's kind of foretelling or foreshadowing.
So I guess I can ask the chat, because it could be a yes or a no. But who here has actually believed they've come across true love in their life? I can say I have.
The
Trev,
last.
Namman.
I think it's boring because it's not. It's meant to be, so it's effortless. So not really boring as in inadventurous, but boring as in no effort.
Hmm.
Think about it from the end, and I'm kind of pulling from the book itself because I kind of know, but like, but just think about from circumstances outside of your shoes kind of thing, like watching two people that are in love, like, especially from a friend's standpoint, it's not that fun. They usually get thrown to the side. They're usually like neglected because the two people are in love. They can usually only think about themselves. I can say I'm guilty of these things. Um, so I mean, from an outside perspective, especially when you're telling a story to other people, true love is boring. Like I can say, even though I'm happy for Roland, reading that one time he had this love with Susan and they got to spend some time together, and even knowing the outcome, I still love this time that he had, but it's still not one of my favorite parts of the story. Like, yay, Roland's getting to kiss, Roland's getting to have sex. Like, the funner parts of the story is all the stuff that happens around that. And it's one of my favorite things about this is King does not elaborate on those moments. They're really, short chapter contained. Like, yeah, they had this moment where they made out for days, who knows, but he doesn't go into detail and all, I don't know.
Except for whenever Rhea was feeling her up. That was pretty detailed.
Rhea and the whole like. So that's going to be a question for my next, our part 2 to this is we're going to talk a lot more about this crystal ball and this pink light that's coming out of this crystal ball, because we saw some effects that pink light had on Rhea, right? That girl got moist for the first time in like 10,000 years. Now, I don't quote me on the years. I don't know. She's old, but
Time works funny over there.
yeah, and I do want to say time works funny. I do want to say that that colors are gonna start to play a more heavier predominant role. We got this dude running around with the color, on his name, the Crimson King. Yeah, go ahead, Trey.
So, is this orb? Is somebody on the other side of the orb? Like in Lord of the Rings, it's a communication device with Sauron. So
they're not all accounted for.
I want to say you are like spot on. I'm going to say, yeah, spot on. You're like 100% right. But there's a catch, because this is the Eye of Sauron. But King couldn't just copy Lords of the Rings. So you're going to find out that there's not just one of these things. Like maybe the Eye of Sauron didn't just have one eye. It had like 40 or 200. We don't know.
Maybe
but let's
13.
just say it's not just one. Yeah, maybe 13.
Maybe a black one.
They're different colors. They might do different things.
Maybe. Maybe the exact
title of the book.
Wizard and Glass? What? Maybe it's all the colors of the rainbow.
Yeah, it's their Lucky Charms, man.
Didn't we see that at a certain train station? Didn't we see that at the train station? And we saw these like totems, and the totems each had a specific color that was linked to the totems. And we kind of saw that at the beginning of this book too.
The protectors of the beams?
Yeah, yeah.
I hear her singing.
And even in this book, where we saw 2 references, because Roland hides behind the totem of the bear and the turtle, and it's exactly where Eldest hides later on, behind the turtle and the bear. But they have their color. One's brown and one's green. Like,
which is where that they entered also between those two.
What?
Yeah.
More Ka at work, huh?
Right? That's awesome.
Maybe they are on the path of the beam and they just don't know. Maybe Ka's lead them exactly where they need to be.
Roland just feels his way along at this point.
Well, they're so close to the thinny, it's screwing everything up.
I have to think about that one. Lords of the Rings, just a copy of Dracula.
I think they're off the path of the beam, but they're always with Ka.
Yeah, and you know that's right. That's
how the saw bends, They're close to the
Mhm.
beam, but they're close to the beam. But
Hey, Johnny Knight. Yeah,
oh
but that
man,
officially, that's all my questions. I had like 3 or 4 more, but we're actually right at that 2 hour mark. I think we did a good job covering this part. It did. I mean, there's a lot of moments that we didn't like really talk about or anything. Does anybody want to? I mean, I would like to reference the bar scene where you know Roland and his crew do get the upper hand on the coffin, the big coffin hunters, to the point where, and this is kind of a weird thing that's known within the community, is most people at this point kind of jokingly call the big coffin hunters little coffin hunters, and it just so happens that in the book, the town starts calling Roland and his crew the little coffin hunters. It's kind of like a weird side thing.
you guys
Now,
mentioned the ore rigs, by the way.
did a
Yep.
little in the description, but we didn't really.
Sitco oil rigs that were still
Yeah.
running.
Texaco,
Exxon,
Well,
Sunoco.
only
Texas.
some of them were still running, and only
19 of them
they
were running.
they were only able to refine the oil like certain way.
Well, they didn't know how to
I
refine
like.
it. It came out
Yeah,
too sludgy. They don't have the technology. They need aluminum for that.
that's why in Susan and the town's eyes, they had no need for that oil because they had already lost the
Can I
knowledge of
guess?
technology. Yeah. Oh, that's
For
coming. We're
some
doing
reason, I'm
predictions.
thinking Roland is going to somehow betray the mission, which is going to lead to all these supplies and everything helping the other side of the war for Susan. But then Susan's going to end up dying anyway.
Hmm. Do you have any other predictions, maybe about the present day group, how that's going to go? Do you have any thoughts about the building, or what looks to be a building in the middle of a highway? Yeah,
Glass building
it's a big glass
toppled,
building.
toppled over onto the highway, right?
To them at this point, and it's probably
They're
like
so
the
far away,
Mirage.
yeah.
Yeah, the thinning. It's probably like the I don't remember if it's exactly in the freeway or if it curves and it just appears. I don't remember that part.
And they
Steve,
mentioned how they all try to see it. Roland was the only one who could really see it.
nah,
His,
Roland doesn't want to look at it. Roland doesn't want to look at it. Like
what was I thinking about? With his gunslinger eyes, or they were looking so far. Maybe that was later.
that's when he's counting the horses. Like that's one of the things that Susanna picks up. She's like, "How the hell could he see that?" And that's actually that leads into the first question she asked Roland about who he really is, because he starts demonstrating like gunslingerish stuff. No, but in the very beginning of the story, when we come across that glass building in the road, our whole quartet looks at it. Roland seems to glance at it, but like Eddie's the one that points it out, that it seems like that for some reason he doesn't want to look at the building. Like, and every time he does look at it, it's like a quick like second glance or something.
Because it's trouble and he knows it.
Yeah, that's what he says. It's trouble on the road, and there's no point in thinking about it
Until we get to it.
Yeah, until they get to it. Which mirrors something else, right? At the very end of this book, he says that exact same thing to his group about when Cuthbert, or no, I think it's Elaine that asked him about direction and what they're going to do next, and Roland doesn't really know at this point, not until they go out to Sitco and they see the oil drums and stuff like that. But even still at this point, he still kind of doesn't know, the direction or whatever.
I really wish we could all get together and have a palabble like that and get all like in a trance like they were, because that's
And
pretty
just talk
awesome.
for days.
Yeah, just talk for days.
And
Even
to
Oi was
highlight,
like, Oi.
want to highlight that, okay, it's such a magical thing where Eddie points out that he knows he hasn't drinking in that time, that they haven't eaten, that they haven't slept, and they've been sitting for that long, and his aches do not his muscles don't ache. He doesn't feel like he needs water or that needing food, even though Jake's eating. It's stated that Jake is just eating out of it's just there kind of thing. He's not really hungry.
Mhm.
More like popcorn at the movies kind of thing. Okay, so Cheney's asking. So our part 2 is basically it's the rest of this book. We stopped at part 3. Come reap. That is where we stopped, and then so for the next part, we're reading from there on to the rest of the book.
We're usually we're breaking all of them down into 2 parts.
Mhm.
Okay. There you go, Cheney. Every book we have 2 different parts. So basically every month we go through a book.
Mhm.
Because we're doing this every other week.
Except when we get to June, that'll be that little break when we do Heroes Con. That'll be the one. That'll be a 3-week gap in between that one. But that's the only one. That's the only one.
Yeah, in August I'll probably take a break when Fan Expo is in.
That'll be wind in the keyhole. You'll be good. Nah. All right, guys. Well, I want to thank everybody that stopped by. I want to thank my panel of my quartet, the group and everybody. I mean, I don't know. I had fun. I don't know about y'all.
Yeah.
But thank everybody for coming out
Well,
again.
I couldn't make it all the way through.
It was a robust conversation. Robust.
And we will be back for the part 2 in 2 weeks. Same bad channel, same bad time. Until then, I will see y'all later. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Pleasant nights and pleasant dreams. I don't know.
Long days and